Hello everyone, thanks for being on the call. Hello DJ with freshly made coffee, which I'm slightly concerned is instant coffee because of how quickly DJ made that, which really offends me to my deepest core as a total coffee snob. Yes, so thanks for being here. I thought last week's one of these was really good and exciting and fun. We talked about building the exercism economy. I mean, we talked about it for about 5 minutes at the end, which is what the meeting was supposed to be about, but we talked about lots of other interesting things beforehand, which is good. I said to Eli earlier that I always enjoy it when he brings questions because it covers up for my total lack of preparation for these meetings. And I think we only got about 5 minutes of actual stuff I was supposed to talk about last time, which was perfect. So the more questions, the better. DJ, like, I'm so going to disagree with that. The bloom of a V60 should be taking 40 seconds, not like DJ's claiming you can make a whole V60 in a minute. Okay, let's not get sidetracked by coffee talk. So today I have the rough agenda in my head of talking about the journey from becoming from signing up to Exercism, starting as a student, moving towards being a mentor, maybe moving in other directions towards being a maintainer, how we want to change that for V3, what that looks like, etc., etc., etc. So that's like my loose sort of high level conversation as a backup for if there aren't enough questions to get there. There are, hey Corey, there are updates to talk about as well, good things that have been happening. So I'm going to start there. So first, let's start with what we were just talking about before this actually properly kicked off, which was that Brooks has put a issue up with some of his thoughts that he talked about on the call last week. DJ, you're in charge of linking everything. DJ size. Yeah, so Brooks put that up. I've commented on there saying, in principle, I think the idea is good, but I have concerns that it makes the test runners quite complicated. Eric told me earlier, very in passing, that he was going to prototype something for this, maybe tomorrow, maybe Tuesday, I don't know. I don't know if that's prototyping the same sort of thing that Brooks was talking about or prototyping something totally different.
It's basically modifying the test runner to change the output, but do as little as possible manually. So I might even get away with automatically generating, for example, the expected or the actual message bit by analyzing the AST and then doing some transformations on it. Fun stuff. Let's just say fun stuff.
2-line of code program to let's write an automated test result thing, which I love. That's cool.
So that's why it's a proof of concept, right?
Yeah, it's good. And I want to do the same for Ruby as well. Like I sort of know how I'm thinking of doing that in Ruby. It's not going to be via ASTs, but it's going to be just rewriting mini test. But I think like what I'm concerned about is that we end up making the test runners quite a hard piece of infrastructure. And because the test runner is like the only thing that I really want every single of the 52 tracks to have before we launch V3, just so they can all use in-browser coding. Thinking about how we can try and do that is really important. Whereas I hadn't expected most of, well, not probably expected most of them, but not expected all of them to have representatives, for example. So yeah, but a proof of concept is definitely what is missing right now. So if you nail that, Eric, that'd be awesome. Are you doing C# or F# or both?
I'm doing C#.
C#. Awesome. Cool. So there's an issue there. So check that out afterwards. Post some comments on there, Brooks, if you want to show us how amazingly easy it is in AST-based language like Lisp and show off. We can all hate you for it. But thanks for putting that in there. Jop, is it Jop? Am I pronouncing that right? Yes.
Yep.
Awesome. My Dutch is, no, I'm not saying that. That's too complicated for my mouth. Jop was teaching me about which bit of his name is a forename and a surname. So now I understand Dutch names a bit better. relevantly to this, rather than me just showing off that I can badly pronounce a Dutch name, he created a nice little script that saves the chat on the right-hand side and puts that into a GitHub repo as a transcript, which I've linked to from the YouTube video in the last one, and I'll continue to do. That's awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. Yes, at some point we might write some magic program that puts it over the top of the actual video. As one of our new contributors who's helping us with the Ruby stuff is a video expert. So that could be cool. I might pester him for that. Doug, if you're watching this, there's a job for you. But yeah, so that's exciting as well. Sasha's here, but do you have a mic, Sasha? Excellent. I'll tell that as a no. So Sasha has been working on something we talked about, I think, in the call last week, which has been a changelog. So before we discuss that, so one of the things that Carlo built out a few months back was a whole changelog thing inside the website, so that every track can log by each pull request on each individual language track before each v3 any sort of news about any important things. So if you create a new issue, you'd have like a dashboard with all your pull requests, and you could just say, yeah, I want to promote this, and you could type something in, say, yeah, we've created this new exercise, it's really cool, blah blah, hit a button. That will then tweet it out. So every single exercise and track has its own Twitter account. Thank you to the 50 people at GitHub that Katrina recruited one afternoon to each set up a fake Twitter account for that, which is within their terms and service. But we have 50 Twitter accounts that are all OAuThed to Exercism. So the idea is that we would give trusted maintainers, so there would be some barrier of trust, trusted maintainers control over those Twitter accounts that they can manually just be using as like cool places to talk about their language and to be retweeting cool stuff they find, but also that we'll automatically be posting out onto those Twitter accounts as well when cool things happen on the tracks. But also in V3, we're going to have a live dashboard as the first page you hit, which is one of the more complicated pages, but exciting pages, where sort of general site news that's happening about Exercism will happen. Let me move my mic a bit closer to me, because I just realised my mic's miles away from me. And everyone turns the volume down. And where also, if you're subscribed to tracks, you're going to see track-specific stuff coming through. So this is going to mean that as a student, when you log onto Exercism, you'll be able to see, oh, this track's updated this exercise, added this new exercise, incorporated this new concept, lots of things like that. So that's something that we've built. We've just never launched it, but that's exciting. So we'll roll that out as part of V3. But as part of sort of, I guess, an interim bit of this, but I think it will all sort of get merged forward as well, and specifically for maintainers. Sasha, along, I think, with Eric and DJ, I don't know if there's anyone else that's contributed to that, has put together a spec of what a changelog would look like that's automatically generated, I think automatically generated maybe, from pull requests, where it lists all of the key things broken down by subject with some details. There is a link which has appeared on the bottom right that you can all see in the comment section. This is where Job's magic comes into play. Eric, do you want to, I sort of haven't been present for this, so do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so it is automatic. Sasha being the GitHub Actions expert that we have. So I think the idea was that once a pull request is merged, a GitHub action will run, and that GitHub action will then be able to see what was in the pull request. We'll check for example, if there was a modification to the exercises directory. If there was a new one, there will be a new file, new exercise, etc. And Sasha will then parse out the first paragraph of, I think, the instructions, and he will parse the concepts and the prerequisites, and you will have this very, very nice overview that you can use to be up to date with whatever is happening, because it can be really hard to keep track of all the different tracks. And yeah, what we did today is basically I just looked at what Sasha created and told him if I liked it. So that's as far as my contribution goes. But Sasha did all sort of grunt work and working with GitHub Actions and having Slack integration too, etc. So all the nifty programming stuff is done by Sasha, and I just said, "Hey, this looks great." So that was my job.
It's the important contribution of code with you, Eric.
Yeah, definitely.
So the other thing, as Eric just alluded to, is that we've got a Slack integration coming from this as well, so that when a new concept exercise gets merged, it can post into sort of a V3 updates channel. So we can sort of get more of a finger on the pulse of just stuff that's happening automatically and celebrate those things a little bit. So that's cool. That's exciting. I don't know if Sasha's actually done any work on this yet. Like, I sort of jumped into Slack in the channel this was happening in and was like, "Woohoo, Sasha, you did an amazing job." And he was like, "I've just written a gist." So I'm not sure if we're bigging up his progress so far or not. But Sasha is going to do this, and it's going to be awesome, and it will go live at some point in the future, probably not too distant. Anyone got any questions, thoughts, ideas, feedback on that?
Well, so one of the ideas too is not only to have it be about the exercises too, but also about, for example, documentation that is being modified. So, for example, I did a modification yesterday where we have this whole how to implement a concept exercise plan, and at one point we noted that there was nothing about stories. So we focused on stories a bit this week. We can talk about that later, but there was a step missing. So I added it to the document, but you would never see that unless you would go and check it. So we hope that we can include those changes in the changelog, and it becomes more easily accessible to everybody to see those kinds of things without having to completely go through each single pull request or commit, because people will be terrified to do that.
Yeah, and give up halfway through some slog. But I think this is a great example of how to just take what work has already been done. And yeah, to your point, Jeremy, be able to celebrate it a bit, or even just visibility. I know an earlier conversation we had was about, should you use GitHub's feature to manage your track and the progress? And there's kind of you have to do extra work. I'm not saying we avoid that, but this is a way to get better visibility into the work that's already been done, which seems to be critical in later stages as we get closer to the V3 launch. So, but yeah, it looks great too.
Yeah, I agree with all that a lot. I think getting visibility and celebrating things are great. I mean,
Yeah.
we're at 908 commits into the V3 repo now, which is pretty awesome. 857 closed pull requests. I'm presuming most of those got merged. So we have a nice pull request to issue, like a pull request to commit ratio there as well. Most pull requests are getting squashed into one commit. That's nice. So yeah, I feel like really positive about that. Another big thing that's happened this week has been getting stories into the stories directory. Loads of people contributed to that. Eric's done a load of work in standardizing them, which has been great, and boosting out our docs so it points to them, and that we tell people to add their own stories and to add references to any exercises as well that they have. So thank you, Eric, for that, and thank you everyone that's contributed the various stories. I think that's a really great, I was going to say repository, but that's an overloaded word. That's a really great collection of things to have. If you are feeling creative and just want to add stories, then please do that. I mean, it would help if you weren't just uploading a novel. Like, if it can vaguely be linked to some programming concepts, that would be useful. But yeah, putting those things in is good. We've also had some new exercises made. Eric's been showing his inner child by writing toy race car stories. So we have a classes and a constructors exercise about toy race cars, which I think are really awesome exercises.
The new exercise I'm working on is an RPG one, so I get to keep on being a child.
I don't know. I think RPGs are definitely a thing for adult children like us.
I think adult men are just a synonym for children. So,
So yeah, I'm excited about those. I think those are really good exercises.
Yeah, it's a very small site. Those exercises are all tailored towards object-oriented languages, of which we have many. So there is now a classes exercise, there is a constructors exercise, and I'm now working on an inheritance one. So I have the basic gist of it ready. I have to do the documentation stuff, but I expect it to be, well, up for a review tomorrow. So once we have those three merged, I think many languages that are that have other object-oriented support, they can use those and port them relatively easily. So I hope that will be very useful. And I will be doing more functional ones later, but I wanted to get these basic object-oriented exercises out of the way.
I think the same stories will transfer well into functional equivalents.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Some prototype equivalents for JavaScript, just because it has to be complicated as well, maybe. Good, awesome. So thank you all for those contributions been making. I know everyone's been working hard on just getting their tracks moving forward and things as well. As I said, we've got loads of new people volunteering to be contributors. I am getting probably like 3 emails a day now coming off the back of the videos. So excuse me, so the videos are working for that, which is nice. I'm pleased with that. There's still a massive, like, huge 95% drop off between someone saying I want to contribute to V3 and someone doing anything. That's always going to be hard. We talked last week about creating a concept exercise wizard. Eric and I have worked on that a bit. We didn't probably get as far as we wanted for lots of reasons, but we've got a form now where you can create the basics of a concept exercise. Eric's written a sort of bit of code that pushes to GitHub and makes a draft PR with those files. So we've got sort of the bits in place. We just need to piece it together and then put it somewhere. I think we're probably just 3 hours of actually having the brain space to do that for getting it launched. So finding brain space is hard, but hopefully this week, or wow, it's Thursday. Hopefully next week. So the other thing is I started work on the actual website bit of V3, which is exciting. I put a vlog out about that you may or may not have watched. Sasha tells me I look particularly green and orange in it. Sasha likes to give me feedback on my videos, but they have all been helpful and I'm grateful for them. But this one was the sound's better, but you look like shit. So I'll take that. I'd rather sound good than look good. But yeah, so that's, if you haven't watched that vlog, watch it. It doesn't really say, I guess, too much. It's more of an introduction into the other vlogs. Is out of interest for the people on this call, I guess, who are more the regular contributor / maintainers. Does anyone have any feedback on that video other than the sound or visual quality? More about the content of what they would like to see, of what they'd like to see on future ones. Excellent. In that case, I'll just continue to talk about whatever it is interesting.
Oh, no, I'm going to say something now.
Okay, good.
I expected to have more visuals in the video. It
In
feels
terms of coding?
In terms of everything, because I know we're way further along with what we're doing than how I felt after watching the video. Mm-hmm. It felt like, oh, here is something we're going to be working on maybe somewhere in the future, and not this is what we've been doing over the past months and we'll be doing the continuing months. And I know we don't have product designs and we don't have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but I think the next video you do on the future and V3 should have those.
Okay, so I mean, I agree in principle in terms of we have loads of different bits done. At the same time, I mean, we have like 0 code for the website itself written. I mean, the Exercism is comprised of so many bits, and the website is the bit that everyone interacts with, but it's one of the smallest components of the whole thing. I mean, it's still a big project with a lot of code, but the tracks and the content on the tracks make up a significantly higher proportion of what Exercism is. And then there are lots of other bits that are often hidden away, things like the tracks dashboard you made, for example, DJ. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm being quite authentic when I say there's no code written for V3, because that's true. But I think I was specific about that being the website component rather than the whole thing, because obviously there's huge progress being made. I'd say the other two things are like writing code for me tends to be writing up the code that's already in my head. So, you know, and I think you and I talked about this the other day, TJ, like for me, I've been programming V3 in my head for the last 6 months. When it gets to the point where it's clear enough, then it's just a typing up exercise of a website. And so it's sort of difficult because all of those product discussions and the hundreds of hours that have gone into discussing those things correlate to some sort of structure and code and data model and everything else in my head. But I think I hope there is interest in having a vlog series that talks through getting those things onto terminal or something. That's my aim. I haven't even scaffolded. I don't use rail scaffolding. I just yeah, I know what you mean there. Yeah, so that's sort of my thinking. But maybe yeah, it's worth explaining some of that in the video. I just yeah, it's hard to know how to pitch these things.
Oh yeah, I don't have a solution. You asked what we thought, and that's what I thought.
I sort of don't want to do a video where I'm like, oh, I can make this whole website in 2 months and I've already coded it all in my head and sound like a total arsehole. And I sort of feel okay saying that on this call with the people here, but like, I think it just sounds quite pretentious on a sort of vlog style call, and I sort of wanted to avoid that. But yeah, I mean, it might all just be great when we get 2 minutes down the line. It turns out actually I can't code anymore because I've been so long since I've written any code, and this all goes totally to shit. I think there's going to be other things as well, like as we firm up some of the product design, like so the UX design stuff. I think I want to do like videos around that, around the decisions we're making and that sort of thing. At the same time, I'm very wary of disclosing any of those with people like outside of a very tight community, because the moment something gets out there, people expect it. But certainly there's like the stuff there that I think as well will make nice vlogs in parallel to this.
Yeah, so I was going to say that on the design side of things, so we don't have to be, I mean, let's say we're thinking about talking people through that journey that we're taking on that side of things. We don't need to be overly specific about, it's going to look like this or look like that. We can talk in generalities and just take people down that path with us. So rather than, us just one day appearing out of the blue saying, hey, here's what we think V3 should look like. We are more kind of, in a more general sense, bringing people on that journey through the video. So I think there might be some scope there to do something.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's difficult because in my head, like, there's a huge difference between the product decisions that go into working out what V3 looks like, and that we've sort of talked about quite a lot in terms of the high level stuff like the 4 reasons, X's and sucks, like the motivation for those product decisions. And then there's the sort of actually building out a Rails project as a website thing. And then I feel like UX is what crosses those two barriers. It's the thing that sort of has its foot in either side and it is crossing those two worlds. So yeah, I think having vlogs on all of those things are good. I think, yeah, I think we'll see. But yeah, I agree with both of you, DJ and Tyre, that trying to bring those other elements into the vlogs in general is important and good. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments on those? Cool. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions in general from the last week or forever?
I had a couple going back to what we were talking about earlier. Now's a good time.
Yeah, go.
So the wizard that you and Eric are working on, how does that relate to some of the language specific code generators? So I've noticed like Rust, we have shell script. I think Python, Yawpitch worked up a nice Python tool to just do that scaffolding for a given concept exercise in the language. So maybe just like describe like that, your guys' vision for this wizard, and maybe it's, yeah, interaction or not with the kind of language specific ones.
Cool.
Out of
Yeah, you go.
curiosity, with the other scaffolding generators that you've seen, are they, how exactly do they work? I took a look at the Python one. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the Python one currently generates like the contents of, like, say, the test suite at the moment. I think it's just like listing, it creates the files, puts a template in one of the files, I think.
Indeed. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have not actually looked at the code, so you're right on
Okay.
how it works. I'm more familiar with the Rust shell script. I guess I'm reading them as both doing the same thing, bootstrapping concept exercise for given track.
Okay. Yeah. I think we have one for Common Lisp as well. I think I realized it's a bit more general, so you can create a folder. It can be, I think any language should work fine. I'll just need to make a couple tweaks to it, but it can be any language, and then you just give it a slug, and it will replace the slug in both file names and in the contents of files. So you should be able to like even generate all the boilerplate code inside of like test files, and just have a slug that it replaces, I think, as well.
So I'm going to just jump in. So I think to bring these different points together, the wizard for me is just going to be introduction instructions, example file, and then maybe some, I haven't quite worked out what yet, but maybe some like bits of the design MD in terms of this is a list of prereqs and this is a list of concepts taught. The idea is that that wizard is going to generate just the instructions, introduction, and an example that can then go through an early, very high level pull request cycle with maintainers to say this is an exercise that we would accept, the story is appropriate, the level of depth in the concept is appropriate, and this example code is something that we think is the right size for a concept exercise and has a narrow enough set of concepts. Then, and that's going to be a draft PR that automatically is generated. So you go into the website, fill those boxes out, hit go, post draft PR, probably with a status of early sign off or something that's not that rubbish. And then at that stage, when that gets signed off, then is when the fleshing out happens, the test suite gets added, the stub gets added, all of the other files. So there's an interesting point there at which it might be quite nice to have like a GitHub action command where it's like stub me or whatever, something better than that, scaffold me. In DJ likes his scaffolding. And that could be what you're talking about, Brooks, where it's then like scaffolding the remaining files around that thing. And at that stage, I guess that can just be like some sort of action script style thing, not action script, action/script style thing that lives in the repo where we could add language specific hooks on, where it might have like a boilerplate like the thing Brooks has done for any language, and then it can have almost add-ins around it. That's sort of the vision I'm thinking how it might fit together.
So like in a way, it's kind of the content part of it and really sort of, yeah, validating the semantics that a contributor's on the right path with a concept exercise.
So to shape it another way, and if that's all a maintainer did and they got it to that stage and it goes through that process and it's good, I feel like that's a good contribution, and I feel like other maintainers could then go and do a lot of the hard work. Excuse me. One of the big like issues we have at the moment is that these really large PRs come in with like 20 files or however many files there are. Feels like an infinite amount sometimes. And there's like a huge amount of like feedback that someone gets. Like I saw one PR earlier, someone just replied, wow, that's a lot of feedback. And like often, like speaking frankly, often it would be nice just to merge that first pass that someone's done and then for a more senior maintainer to jump in and just make it good. But there's a lot of thinking and effort that goes into that first bit. And I think the thinking and effort that goes into the first bit of coming up with a story, coming up with that file, is a lot of energy. But I think somebody who does that well might not also be the same person that does the writing really clear introductions, writing really clear instructions. There's even like language barrier things. If people don't have particularly like great native level English, then often just the cycles of someone going through and correcting their English is just a pain for everyone. Whereas I would almost like rather merge a current pull request and then have someone go through and just like fix all that stuff. So it's not annoying for the contributor who's done all the work, and it's not annoying for the maintainer. And we've been doing that in some cases where it's like, this is good enough, let's just merge it and then we'll just patch it later. And so I think in my head, there's like a two-phase thing here where if a new contributor, and that's one of the things I want this to really help with, is if a new contributor came in and just sort of did those 3 files and did a good enough job of it, like that's a contribution that gets that exercise off the ground. And then the more senior maintainers can go through and almost be like standardizing and building out the tracks nicely in a way that they feel comfortable with. And so that's sort of one of my goals in this, really.
Thanks. That's helpful clarifying, because I think the first discussion of this, I'm just thinking of it as another, you can't do this, right? Like validation's almost negating something someone's bringing in. But I think your vision for it is really to encourage early contribution and channel it appropriately amongst the current exercism kind of team structure. So that way it is rewarding for everyone involved, and people can be nestling in where they're good at.
And separating the idea of coming up with an exercise and building that first pass of it from writing an exercise in the state it's finally going to be presented to a student. And I think the latter is a lot harder because it involves you reading every single one of these docs in so much more depth. Whereas I feel like you can read, if we do a good job of giving the concise key points, I feel like there is enough that somebody could read to make that first big step forward. Did you have a second question as well, Eli?
Just a real small, well, I guess it would switch the topic to stories. So
cool. That's good.
Thumbs up. Okay, so with stories, it's really like a reference bank, reference material. So we could go to it and just say, hey, I want to implement a concept exercise. Here's the exercism concept title on the left, and here's this great little story I can just drop in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. And then the second question I had was for anyone kind of doing this in tracks, or for those that are more along the path of a track and implementing concept exercises, are you linking stories together? Is there a grand narrative with a lot of your concept exercises, or is it just a la carte?
I think nobody should strive to have the major tree of exercises all thought out. I think that will go horribly wrong. It's like a case of over-engineering, I think. So it's much better. Sorry?
I said there are themed groups that are working quite well, like the racing car ones for you, Eric, and the logline ones.
Yeah, so some things naturally build on each other. The logline one is, while I was building it, I was doing it with strings, and then, hey, if I was really doing this in production, I would do an enum because it was a restricted set of values. All right, so why not reuse the theme with enums? And the same thing with the remote control car. I used it for the classes exercise, and then I wanted to do constructors. Hey, wow, this makes total sense. Let's just have the speed and the battery drain as constructor parameters, and we can teach it with the same concept, with the same story. But I don't think you necessarily have to reuse it everywhere. But if it fits, it fits. Well, why not? So as long as the exercise is, does what we want it to do, so it explains the concept well, I don't care if you reuse the stories.
Yeah, and I think the stories could be used for different exercises. Like this racing car one might be for constructors in C#, but if that same thing triggers something for totally different.
Yeah, so
cars and monads.
I had the example of the Wizards and Warriors. I was actually triggered by the Booleans exercise that had RPG logic. with somebody that's trying to rescue her friend.
Annalyn tries to rescue her
right.
best friend.
It's a JavaScript based one. So I took that as inspiration. I tweaked it a little bit. And now I have my own story, and I'm the author because I now get all the credits. So yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, so we've been grouping stories together if the contents, like the concept, is also related. So all our array exercises now are all based on the magician card story, because it is the same concept, but then everything else we try to use a new story. So for example, we now have an array analysis PR that's almost ready to merge, and it builds on the story of trying to become a magician and have those cards, because it's a prerequisite for this exercise. It wouldn't work if it was the other way around, right? Like if the order of the exercise is no longer cut and clear, it doesn't work to say, oh, now the magician is trying to do some more with cards, because you don't necessarily know that they've already done it. So I think that would be a good rule if you want to have a rule when to reuse or when not to reuse. It probably works if the concept is related, and it's probably harder if it's not related. But I would really encourage you to try to make one big story, and I want to read it, because they get me very excited.
I'm too far behind on the actual concept exercise that I'm not going to go embark on my creative writing for the sake of exercise. Although that is a carrot on the stick, which I may try to come up with some stories later.
Like it. Good. Has anyone else got any questions, or shall I dive into the theme of the call? Good. So, as normal, I have a carrot, I guess, to dangle to get your brains thinking, and any immediate discussion points or thoughts, and then it's always great to discuss these further. So, last week we talked about credits. So 30-second recap. You get credits for doing things, where things is like the set of everything on Exercism that's in any way contributing. And you spend credits on things, where things in this case is anything where you want to get something back. So you get credits for mentoring, and you spend credits on asking for a mentor. You might also get credits for maintaining, writing analyzers, writing whatever. So that's credits. And credits are going to be variable. So you could put a bounty on one of your exercises and say, I really want someone to mentor this ASAP. Here's 1,000 credits if somebody goes and mentors it. Reputation is a similar but different thread to this world, and it's important for different reasons. So reputation will be accrued as you do things. So in the same way that you get credits for doing things, you will get reputation for doing things. But if somebody puts 1,000 credit bounty on something, you don't then get 1,000 reputation. You're still going to get an incrementing amount of reputation. And whereas you can spend credits, reputation is ever growing, and it unlocks privileges. So I always get a cough on this call, sorry. So the privileges, and I like the word privileges because it's really jobs, but we're shaping it well as privileges. The privileges will be things like, well, a simple example will be, and where I want to talk about here, you will get to give feedback to somebody. So one of the constraints in Exercism right now is that you can't give feedback unless you've completed an exercise yourself. Sometimes this really annoys people because they're like, I just want to help out and give feedback. And I'm like, that's great, but you don't understand how Exercism works yet. If you've not been mentored on Exercism, then you're just going to go into this with all sorts of your own ideas without being a good citizen. So the point of reputation really is a judgment of how good a citizen you are and how much you can be trusted. So if you have received feedback on 5 exercises, and I'm making these numbers up, at that point, we think, okay, you've had enough feedback, you've understood enough about Exercism that you're somebody that we would then give the opportunity to give feedback to somebody else. And so at that stage, we would then open up some sort of bit of Exercism, that's as specific as I'm going to get, where you see that there are solutions that you can give feedback on. And it might be that you can only give feedback at this stage on solutions that have really low bounties. The really high bounty ones are reserved for the really high mentors. But game theory to be determined, as well as level of programming time for me. But at some point, you then have given feedback on enough solutions that we say, okay, you seem to be doing a good job of this. Now we're happy for you to write representations, and those are going to be given out to thousands of students that are using concept exercises. So your feedback here is going to be viewed by lots and lots of people. You're going to have a much wider impact. If you do something wrong at this stage, you'll give bad feedback, you're going to be detrimentally affecting lots of people. If you give good feedback, you're going to be positively affecting lots of people. So the barrier to contribution here for us, the level of trust we want, is much higher than just giving feedback to one person on one person's solution. So we're going to be effectively removing this idea of, I am a student, now I have signed up to be a mentor. And the whole thing is going to be a scale. I start off as a 0 reputation. Oh, my Alexa has just kicked off in the background. You're going to start off as a brand new person with no reputation. You are going to use Exercism and gain a bit of trust. You are going to give a bit of feedback and get more trust. You are going to then be allowed to write representations. There's a parallel thing here, which is I want to be able to contribute to exercises. So there are a load of issues around exercises, I don't know, docs that need improving, or the boring bits that maybe the senior maintainers don't want to do. Those are on Exercism, probably linked into GitHub, and you can see all of these things. You can choose one, you can fix it, you can do a PR, you can get credits then for contributing as a maintainer. And then slowly over time, you unlock more maintaining privileges until you can be a proper maintainer. So these sort of very black and white Boolean boundaries between I am this or I am that are going to be replaced by this ongoing scale. So that's sort of the area that I think is interesting to think about and discuss. There's obviously loads of challenges in this. It mimics Stack Overflow almost better than the credit system. It's much more aligned to what they do around unlocking privileges. I can edit other people's comments on Stack Overflow because I've got X amount of reputation or whatever. So I'm interested in people's thoughts. I'm interested in all of the concerns people have about this and why it might be a bad idea. Things that people like or dislike. Every initial gut reaction is good, and then after this call, everyone can go away and think about it and post more of their concerns or ideas or everything else. Go.
I guess I'll start. So if there's a way to gain reputation, is there a way to lose reputation?
It's a good question. So the reputation you would gain from giving feedback would be based on somebody positively reviewing, I don't like the word, but reviewing the feedback you've given. So if somebody has a bad interaction with you, then there would, I imagine, be some sort of reputation penalty for that. I'm not sure. There won't be a way to spend reputation. It's not a currency, so we don't need a sink. It doesn't matter if somebody gets a bazillion reputation. That just means they've contributed loads into Exercism. And in fact, I imagine there are people on this call, I'm pretty sure for certain, who would want to be at the top of the reputation leaderboard. And it is something where actually it's the one place I wouldn't mind having a leaderboard with an Exercism is these are the people that have actually contributed the most to Exercism. This is our #1 contributor. There's also, it's not quite what you asked, Ty, but I also imagine there's going to be reputation per track as well. So this is the person who's top of the Rust track. This is the person who's top of the Ruby track, the people who have contributed the most to this. And then there's a level, excuse me, of platform trust as well as a level of language trust. So we know that we can trust this person to be a mentor because they've demonstrated that, but we don't yet know that they're good enough at Ruby to be a Ruby mentor. We only know they're good enough at Rust to be a Rust mentor. So we might want to see them go through a few Ruby exercises first before they can mentor on Ruby. So I haven't thought about particularly how we would penalize reputation if you want to do that. Getting downvoted is the equivalent on Stack Overflow. I definitely think we want to be very careful taking away reputation from someone, because I think it would be a very annoying thing if someone took some of my reputation away. But there does need to be, if you can get rewarded for doing something good, there does need to be a sort of counterbalance of that, I think. Eric?
Yeah, so Stack Overflow does things with this. For example, if you have reputation that you can do certain edits, but other people, and you do some edits, and you gain more reputation, but other people see that you're just, well, gaming the system, just doing these, basically removing white space or whatever. It's totally insignificant, although white space can be significant, blah, 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 blah. But then you get penalized, not as much that your reputation goes down, but that your privileges get revoked for a small while. So you do get the chance to basically be a good citizen again, and your privilege will be automatically restored to you. But if you do bad things, well, you get your reputation stays the same, but you get the privilege revoked.
You can also, that's Eric speaking from experience, by the way.
Yeah.
You can also you can also spend your reputation on Stack Overflow.
Yeah, you can.
So I talked to Tyler about this the other day, and said if you want to downvote someone's answer on Stack Overflow, you lose a reputation every time you downvote someone's answer. And Ty pointed out that that's actually a really good analogy for real life as well, where if you call something out in real life, if you criticize somebody, even if you think you're right, you are probably taking a bit of a reputation hit amongst the group that you're in for doing that as well. So I think it is an interesting real world analogy. There's a lot of game mechanics in here. I'm almost certain none of them are going to make it into the first cut of this, realistically. But yeah, having long-term sort of ways that we want to think about this and ideas that are sort of formulating into this is going to be really fun, I hope, and important to get right. DJ, you were unmuted for quite a while then. Were you looking to say something?
Oh no, I was exactly going to say that the one thing to do on Stack Overflow that works is subtracting one single point for a downvote, which also gives us two things. You can't downvote if you haven't done anything yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it really helps with new and spam accounts. Like you actually have to do a single thing, a single contribution before you can downvote, which in our case could literally be the first exercise, right, for a student. But it also, when it costs something, people think about it, even if it's just 1 point. It's really stupid, but that's how it works. Once it's free, it's just, oh, I don't care. And if it's 1 point, it's still 1 point. So I definitely, when I was thinking about this week, I definitely agree that you definitely have to separate reputation from coins, and you definitely would just want to stack up reputation as you go and as you contribute, because that's never going to be a limiting factor then for people contributing. Mm-hmm. As for, you could call it, I don't know, exercism experience. I don't know what for stupid word thing you could do, but I would definitely see that. I haven't figured out how we could do coins or points or whatever, something that you can actually do. So, someone else.
Put a giant spreadsheet together for the economy bit of this, and then ask myself why I'm using spreadsheets and model it in code instead, but then probably pass it to Sasha because he does maths code and I do Ruby. But anyway, we're going to model this in some way or another to actually look at some of the permutations that will happen or might not happen. Sasha says no thanks. Eric, bad luck. So I think look at some of the ways that these might happen. What happens if we have 1 million people sign up and suddenly we have an inflow of 1 million coins because they all get one? How does this work? Just looking at some of the permutations of this to understand, how do we need a sync? I'm not actually convinced we do need a sync after thinking about it more, because I think as long as the ratio of new users to mentoring requests increases relatively in parallel, I think that's fine. The issue more occurs with coins or credits, whatever, that are being generated not from new users. And so thinking about how we do that, one of the things we talked about last week was like how you might get like a credit every time your feedback's given to somebody. I actually wonder if you get a reputation point or a bit of a reputation point every time your feedback's given to someone instead of a credit, because that then doesn't flood our system with inflation, but it does reward somebody with the fact that their reputation is growing because they've helped a dozen more people. And actually in the designs that Tyab's been putting together for the Exercism IDE, you know, the person who is giving that feedback from representations and from analyzers is very prominent in there now. And I think both analyzers and representers will all be about people. I don't think we're going to have any feedback coming from an Exercism bot. It's going to be coming from the person that's written it in all cases. So then, you know, the natural reputation of that person from their face being showing a lot is going to be increased as well. Eli, go.
Oh yeah, it's just Zuzia had a question on the sidebar that we could touch on.
Yeah, Zuzia. So she said, I wonder if since you need to spend credits to be mentored, you can run out of credits. So did you think about where you won't be able to continue learning from mentors without earning credits? So one thing I thought about for this, I say it might not be my idea, but it's in my head, is the idea of a transient credit. So every day you get 1 credit, which can be spent. If it's not spent, it doesn't roll over. So every day you could request mentoring on 1 solution. I don't know exactly how that works because that still risks flooding in with new credits, as we're talking about. So there are risks in there. But Eli's starting Exercism Bank. I'm still toying with whether we should do this on the blockchain just for shits and giggles.
Just insert the word, right? That will bring
exactly. That's it.
it.
I mean, if Exercism ever wanted investment, which obviously we don't, but if we ever did, having a developers blockchain Bitcoin currency built in, that's where the millions are, right? Yeah, good. So let's not use the blockchain. I trust my database coding for reasons that I probably shouldn't. So yeah, I think there's some sort of transient credit anyway to answer that question. Exactly how that again works with an inflation system, I don't know. Maybe we have a tax. Maybe Bitfield gets taxed for getting too many credits each day because he mentors too hard, and we just have we have some sort of, I don't know.
It's a luxury tax.
A luxury tax, yeah. Maybe you can spend your credits on reputation, but at a really high taxed point.
Or Exercism swag.
Yeah, I still like the idea of being able to spend your credits on Exercism swag as a sort of discount point. That is the right way. Yeah, trickle down credits.
I think
maybe go on.
I have an irreverent joke, so if you have something serious to say, please say it.
Mine was just going to be like, maybe you can gift your credits to new users in a sort of kind trickle-down economy, but let's just avoid that, I think. Go on, Eli.
Yeah, I mean, mine was similar. It's let's just inject all our geopolitical conflicts into the system, and we have a fairly, globally distributed bunch. I'm sure we could come up with a great list.
I like it. That's good. Brooks, you've been unmuted forever. Did you have something sensible to contribute?
I mean, nothing too terribly massive, but I do think that the idea of reputation instead of credits for representer solutions is excellent. I think that's a good way to address that. And then with keeping the credits, I guess, limited somehow, we could have where maybe after you've hit a certain number of credits, credits just kind of slowly start turning into reputation. I think like you suggested or something like that. I mean, it'd be interesting to say at what point you can, if someone's got 1 million credits, it's not likely that they need 1,000,001, and that's like a deal breaker. So if one of them, floats into reputation or something. So you could have a rate like that.
Yeah, I mean, we could just cap credits as well.
Yeah, that is one.
Like, I mean, it could just be a point where your bank is full, and maybe, you know, maybe after a certain point of credits, all of the rest of your credits do just get like arbitrarily distributed to random users. Everyone just gets a, you know, if you earn 100 more credits, they just go to 100 users, and then that sort of encourages the richest users to actually spend some of their credits. I mean, I don't know, but yeah, it's interesting points. So one thing just asked on the side as well is about how different tracks with levels of different popularities are affected by this. Shall I pass this? Yeah, I don't know. I think one thing to consider is that if because every track will have its own, I'm reluctant to use the word leaderboard, but list of top contributors. In smaller tracks in terms of number of students, it's probably easier then for you to rise to the top of one of those leaderboards and then to be able to say, woohoo, I'm the, you know, top Exercism contributor for Prologue or whatever the random less used track is. And, you know, maybe the sort of the leaderboards, if you like, at a global level are the top people in each track rather than the top entirely. It's hard because you want to be comparing, you do want to compare levels of contribution. And I think, you know, it is hard with representers where you're just, even though you've put the same in, it's the input-output question from last week and I haven't solved it. But that's the big challenge. Yeah, Ty?
Yeah, I was going to say, to me, the more we talk about this and the more I kind of go through in my head, the currency stuff will, from what we're talking about right now, it looks like it probably would be quite tricky to get it working correctly, and that there's so many potholes and things involved in it. Because if you look at, in essence, what reputation is and what currency is, it has to match in terms of what it is in real life to the system, right? So in real life, when you have a lot of currency, for example, you've got that, you know, usually through creating some sort of value, and then you can exchange that in order to get a product or a service from somebody else, right? Now, if you're that's what currency is. Now, reputation is, you know, I'm, again, say similar concept of I'm providing value or I'm helping somebody or whatever, and therefore I'm growing my reputation. But again, it's not considered this kind of infinitely exchangeable piece of you know, thing or whatever, piece of value that I can, you know, distribute here and there, right? Because as soon as you bring into the fact that you can trade this thing, then it becomes a whole different thing entirely, right? So yeah. I think reputation is a very clean, clear thing that has very appropriate uses in the system currently than what we're talking about. But the currency side of things is still very much a, personally, I'm on the side of right now of whether we should even do it or not.
I think we have to do it. Like, I think the only way to sort of tangibly give people something back for mentoring is to be able to give them some tangible benefit. And the problem with reputation is it gives you more reputation, but gives you more responsibility. And for the people who are gaining reputation, they probably also want that responsibility, because with that responsibility comes a social kudos, which is hopefully valuable in real life, you know, in terms of getting jobs. It gives them an intrinsic desires, you know, reward as well. But, you know, one of the things that people keep coming back to for mentors is that they want this, they want to be able to get something in terms of, if they mentor 1,000 students, they don't want to be the last person in the queue for another language. They want to be able to rise up that queue. They want to be able to get mentored faster. So I think, like, I agree with what you were saying, Ty, about the separation between them. And I think I would not like to be able to roll credits into reputation, that sort of stuff, because I think actually there is a really good separation between them. I think you're right. I think for me, at their simplest, the credits isn't that problematic. You just get credits for mentoring a solution, for mentoring a solution, you spend credits on getting mentored. Like at its most simple MVP, that minimal viable product, that's like the simple system we can have. I think as we add more complexity in, as, oh, we could trade this for swag, or how does it work for representations and that other stuff, that's where there's a lot more complexity that does come in, I think. Maybe the answer is you don't get credits for representations at all at first. Maybe those, it's literally just if you go and mentor somebody, you get credits, and if you want to spend them, you spend them. And then it's quite a simple system.
Potentially, but then there are issues. So if you talk about, I think this goes back to the proportionality of contribution to what you get out of it. So if you look at, for example, all the students that just use Exercism to learn, and that's it, so they're getting what you could say getting something out of it, right? What's the proportionality of that compared to what people put into it, right? So mentorship and maintainership, right? So if that proportionality is extremely large, meaning like, for example, 1 in 20 people will contribute back to Exercism and 19 will take. If that is the situation, then you'll get into a place where, for example, me as a new learner will have, well, no credits to do anything. But let's say if I'm even given credits to start with, let's say I'm really new and I need help on every single exercise that I'm doing. Well, now I can't even afford to do that, right? So you get into these situations where if the proportionality of contribution,
Whoa. But that should not be happening, right? Then if you need help on every single exercise, then you're either not familiar with programming, or you're not doing the concept exercise and just skipping on to the practice exercises. So that's a situation that really shouldn't happen.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think what you're saying, like the vibe of what you're saying, Ty, I agree with, which is we need to make sure that student and those 19 out of 20 students that come in are still able to have a great experience without spending credits. But if they want to get another member of the community to do something for them, there should be a limited amount of how much they can expect some other volunteer in the community to do without being willing to contribute to the community themselves. Like it's the thing of like, we don't just want everyone to be a freeloader. And I think this is what you and I have chatted about a bit, Ty, as well, this student to mentor progression. It's about giving people like easy things that they can do to make Exercism better, so that they can earn some credits and they can get some sort of social credit without having to be the world's best programming expert and feeling they can mentor anything. And I think it's how we get that balance, how we make sure there's a low bar of contribution for everybody. That's an important thing to get right, which I think that's the heart of the problem that you're highlighting, Ty. Is that right?
Yeah, that seems to make a lot of sense. It actually even feels, while you were saying that to me, that if the action to contribute is low level enough, that it should even be part of some sort of soft onboarding approach, where like where like the first 5 things you're doing in Exercism, one of them is to actually contribute.
100%. So this is like the thing I'm really excited about with the dashboard. We talked about the dashboard earlier as a place where you can see what's happening in Exercism in terms of blog posts and everything else, but also in terms of being able to be on your own Exercism journey is something I really feel passionate about this space. So you've gone through 3 concept exercises or whatever. When you go back to the dashboard, it's like like the same type with those 5 things. It's like a bit like the LinkedIn thing. You've ticked your profile page, you've done 3 concept exercises. The next thing on that checklist is give feedback or fix this typo, like fix this bit of documentation that we've highlighted as need a bit of improving.
Give some feedback on your history. What is your programming experience before this, etc.
Yeah,
just easy things that you can do.
Yeah, and that's a good point as well. I mean, we can give people credits for like filling out their profile, and by that I don't mean having to put their name and photo on Exercism, but like filling out what their background is and those other things to make them when they do take something, make that a better experience. So it's like you can almost be giving soft credits for the first few things that someone does just because they're earning, going through those motions. Get people familiar and comfortable with the idea, and then giving them those things. We are 10 minutes over the allotted time. I'm being shouted at by the Dutchies because it's late where they are. I also have to go and do my parents' coronavirus shopping because they're strictly banned from being allowed out the house. And the shop's closed in 50 minutes. So I'm going to go as well. That was fun. Thank you all. I'll put this on YouTube as normal and put a link in V3. If there's any particular topics that anyone would like to talk about next week for my 10 minutes of preparation before this course starts, let me know and I will try and do that preparation. If you are watching this and want to get emailed about when these happen, or you're on this and not getting emailed, then one-to-one me on Slack. And I will add you to my weekly spam list. I think that's it. Thank you all. Thank you for everything you're all doing for Exercism as well. I feel like we're making some progress.
Bye.
I will see you all soon. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.